Okay, so a big trend a few years ago when it comes to weight loss, and recently probably with the keto diets, is low carbohydrate. Do I need to go low carb to lose fat? And that's simply not the case. What happens and what has happened is the majority of the Western diet is probably 40-50% carbohydrate. Now we must make the distinction between more processed carbohydrates versus whole food carbohydrates. Processed carbohydrates obviously not much nutrients in them, energy packed, so easy to overeat on. When people went low carb or went keto, all they're doing is cutting out half of what they normally eat on a daily basis, creating a calorie deficit, and that's how they're losing fat. Same with keto, you're cutting out all your carbohydrates, cutting out the majority of calories you eat, and the reason you have lost fat is not because you ate less carbs, it's because you ate less calories. One of the problems with that is, and I see it all the time, is people cut out carbohydrates, processed carbs, okay, obviously, but then when they go back to eating normally, they don't know how to fit those foods into their plan, thus binge out on them. They can't eat them in control, they can't account for them, they're not sure how many calories are in them, and then they gain all the weight back. So thus they've wasted all that hard work up to now to end up back in the same position, which I'm going to assume you don't want to do. In terms of fat loss, high carb is the same as low carb when calories and protein are the same. So if someone's in a calorie deficit, they're hitting a protein target, it doesn't matter if they go high carb, it doesn't matter if they go low carb, they're going to lose the same amount of fat. Okay, listen to that again. They're going to lose the same amount of fat. Probably in contrast to what Mrs. Jones have told you before. What we want to worry about in terms of high carb, low carb, or even a balance of medium carb is just simply what you prefer, what you work best on, what your energy works best on, cravings, appetite. Or some days you could have more carbohydrates, some days you could have less. On the whole, it plays no difference. So that means, yes, you can have your pastas, your rices, all these delicious foods, but you may have to portion them out to see the calorie content of those foods, because sometimes they are easy to overeat, delicious foods in general. But once we get into account and account for the foods and the portions, you can fit them into your plan. You can eat these foods, feel in control, lose weight, and everyone's happy. Again, a few little caveats like anything in nutrition. It might be wise going higher carbohydrate for the females around your time of the month. Talk about that in the menstrual cycle section. But that just helps with hunger, cravings, keeps your blood sugar in check. Obviously coming from good sources of carbohydrates, but that will help a lot with keeping everything in check. As well as this, we want to look at our exercise schedule. Are you an athlete? Do you train every day? Then it's also important to make sure we're getting enough carbohydrates within those calories, because that will help with training performance. If you're trying to smash the gym every day and you're going low carb, you're not fueling the tank, you're going to feel shit in your sessions, you're not going to be able to lift as much, and your training performance is going to be down. So that will kind of negatively impact your whole composition long term if you're not lifting as much as you should be. As well as this, what freaks people out and makes them enjoy low carbohydrate and keto diets is the water weight you lose when you just stop eating carbohydrates. But that is simply because for every 1 gram of carbohydrate you eat, it brings and stores with it around 3 grams of water. So when you cut out a few hundred grams, you're going to be lighter on the scales. And what scares people is when they add carbohydrates back, they'll step on the scales the next day and the weight is going to be up. We just need to be aware of this. So this means nothing in terms of fat loss. This is simply how much carbohydrates and water you're storing. So just be aware that when you do have a little bit more carbohydrate the day before, higher carb days, your water may fluctuate between 1 kilo or 2. Okay, if you eat a pizza, that could be 1.5 kilos heavier on the scales the next day. Take this into account. Again, differentiate water weight and actual fat gain. If you're in a deficit and your weight's gone up, don't worry, it's just water fluctuations. So that also we need to keep an account, and then you can also tell Mrs. Jones that when she freaks out.